Everyone, and welcome to the council meeting. First is apologies, apologies for the occurrence or how we've been getting in with the meeting, and also the leave absence for Councillor Holding, seconded Councillor Milne. All in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
And against? Carried. Move on to declarations of interest. Right, we'll move on to the forum. So welcome, we've got a few along today. And first up, we've got Cameron Leakey. Yep, come up to announce.
Morning all, thanks for the opportunity. Just wanted to speak to the financial contribution alternative approach that was on your agenda today. Just to introduce myself for those I haven't met, I'm Cameron Leakey. I'm a surveyor based here in Armory Waitaki. And I just wanted to give a bit of an on-the-ground perspective to applying the financial contributions. I read the report and I just had a couple of concerns. Just taking a step back, the purpose of the financial contribution is upgrading land and facilities for open space and recreation, and that's related to subdivision. Just because the value of the land may be increasing at the current time, that doesn't mean that, or it doesn't translate to an increase in costs of parks and reserves. The contribution is not a slush fund. It's a specific reason why that money's there. On our side of the fence, we need to be justifying to the applicants why the financial contribution is applied. And I think that needs to be transparent. At the moment, I don't think it is. It's hard for us to track where that money actually goes. So just in your deliberations today, I just wanted to sort of make the point that we don't have to be grabbing the last dollar. And that was the tone I took out of that report. I think it needs to be more specific than that. We need to be able to justify to the applicants why that amount is coming out. We need to give them clarity as well when they want to take on a development, like what they're going to be up for. And it needs to be fair. For example, a family of five that might be living on a cheaper section, they've got the same right and the same use of parks and reserves as a family of five that may be living on a more expensive section. So for me, that sort of leans towards a flat rate. What I don't want to see is the contribution to really turn into a tax. And to me, the tone of that report just wasn't quite hitting the mark. So I just wanted to give that perspective from my side of the fence really. And if we can keep it simple going forward, that will be a good thing. And if you have any questions on that, I'll be happy to answer them.
Well, just from your perspective, you've read the report, what option would you think is most equitable to the customers, stakeholders?
Oh, I think the flat rate, from my point of view, would be a good option. I think that's just clear, and like a bit of the example I said, like everyone's paying the same amount then. Like I don't understand why if you live on a more expensive block of land, you need to pay more towards the parks and reserves.
Yeah, I contrast that living in a more expensive house. You pay more rates if you live in a more expensive house than you do if you live in a cheaper house.
Yeah.
So it's exactly the same principle. And I'll just pick up a couple of comments you made earlier, and that is that you said you can't track where the money goes, and you need to justify this to the applicants. Why do you think you should be able to track where the money goes? Like when a person pays their rates, the rates are paid to council, and council utilises that money. Same with the financial contributions. Why do you think you should be able to track the money and justify it to the applicants?
Well, I think in your rates, it's quite clear, like you've got your portions where it's going, whether it be libraries, sewer, water, roading. I think it's a significant sum of money, the financial contribution. But we could be talking, 10, 15,000 per section. And I think if we could give the applicant, say if you're a fresh applicant not familiar with the process, and in your breakdown budget to subdivide, you've got an amount here that might be $40,000. I think if we could give them some really like live worked examples of where that's gone, I think that would help to justify why money gets taken.
If it's a flat rate, would you see that across the board applying a different level of variance? And if it's the latter, what do you think it should be? I mean, at the moment, it was, the report says that there's a rule of thumb, informal application of $750 per rural sector, the same value.
Yeah.
Would you argue for that? Would you argue for less or more?
I think, to be fair, rural could be more. I think it should be different between urban and rural. I think there's a different need for those reserves and open spaces if you live in an urban environment as opposed to rural. So I think less for rural is appropriate. But like I say, I would like to keep it simple. Like, I think a rate for urban and a rate for rural would be good.
But you don't have a figure.
Oh, well, I'm not a valuer. I think that's a process that needs to be gone through, probably with valuers. But so, yeah, I wouldn't want to put a figure on it.
Thank you.
Any other questions, councillors? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll take that into account. Right, next up we have Mike Sweeney and Ross Armstrong. Are you happy to speak together or?
Okay.
Welcome.
Hi, my name is Rosalind Armstrong, and I'm just here to talk about the Armory Walkway today and make the council aware to make the need to make it easier to access and to follow. I've lived in Armory for many years and I've seen the walkway gradually being devalued, mostly by being broken up in places for different reasons, and then it's never been reinstated and never been seen as a priority. The walk's used by lots and lots of different people for different reasons, you know, dog walking, training, rehabilitation, lots of different reasons, and by tourists. They're always on the walkways. Walkers are not an organised group as such, but so they need someone to advocate for the walkway, and we're trying to do that, to keep it the way it was intended. Most of them are just ordinary ratepayers, but I'm sure they'd appreciate the council's action on the 5 main stumbling blocks that we've outlined in the proposal, as well as other issues. I'm sure the council could find ways around these problems that have occurred with the walkway, and I'd like to see a proper policy put in place of action to overcome that and to finance, reinstate, preserve the walkway for the future, please.
Yes, if I could add to that, my name is Mike Sweeney. What we'd really like to see is the council setting a policy objective. There's a lot of sympathy on the staff that we've seen in our discussions with them about the walkway and how it's deteriorated, become sort of an orphan over the years. And I believe there's a will to do something about it, but it may take some money and it takes some direction. And I think that should most appropriately come from the council, since you set policy. And we realize that not everything can be fixed at once, but there are some things that can be done immediately, such as fixing the problem at Observatory and Eden Street, and maybe doing something about the Kiwi rail crossing out of the Yamaru Gardens. If you show an interest in this and show a determination, I believe you can get good follow through from the staff. One particular problem that we encountered as we, got to know the walkway better and looked at it more closely was the fact that mountain bikers have entered a portion of it and marked it for their use. And some of us are mountain bikers ourselves, and we recognize that in many situations where you have a flat, straight walkway, walkers and bikers can get along fine without any hazard. But you come at a really serious question when you get a steep and winding walkway, where mountain bikers who may be out for a thrill come down at great speed without being visible to people around the corner, and you can have a family with children and animals walking up the other direction. And in fact, earlier this year, as you may be aware, a young girl was hit on Cape Wanbro by a mountain biker in an unfortunate accident. So as we stated in the proposal we wrote up for you, we would like to see a direction from you or a policy that bikers should be discouraged from all steep and narrow portions of the walkway, using signs and barriers, and encouraged to use their own tracks in these areas. And just to make this a little more graphic, if you haven't been out in the walkway and seen the sections we're concerned with, I believe we have a little video that we prepared, if it's possible to show that now. Very short. This is a section right off of Chunk. It's a little show and tell for you.
Starring who?
I will confess that I was the mountain biker. It's a mountain biker.
You were the mountain biker.
So the situation here is that you have to hand it to the mountain bikers. They are seeking to expand trails for use, and they have built many of their own. But apparently on sections of the walkway, which we identified on the by marking up the council brochure, in these sections, they decided that for whatever reason, they just wanted to direct bikers onto the walkway itself. And again, where you have a steep and winding walkway, it is just an unsafe situation. And we'd like to see that rectified, and especially that this practice of bringing mountain bikers into conflict with walkers be, avoided in the future, not only in these sections of the walkway, but wherever you might have authority.
Further comment first. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks, Michael Ross, for bringing this to our attention, and Mike for taking me around recently and giving me a guided tour of the points that are made there. And I certainly agree that there's a lot of tidying up needs to be done to make the trail more usable for tourists and locals as well, primarily locals. But just one question, Mike, in relation to the conflict with mountain bikers. There are lots of trails which are signed as a mixed-use trail, so for walkers and cyclists. And I know the trail you're referring to is signposted as the link track. Do you think if there was a signage put up there that would show mixed use, both pedestrians and cyclists, mountain bikers, that would perhaps alleviate the problem to some degree?
Again, it depends on the terrain you're dealing with. And where you have steep curves like this, you're always going to have perhaps a young mountain biker who is a little bit, uncaring and might be only concerned with getting the maximum thrill, and it just is too much of a risk.
Or an older mountain bike, maybe slightly out of control.
There you go.
Now, once again, thanks for bringing it to our attention. I used to love using these walkways when I came home on leave many years ago and I had more free time. But just wondering, do you want to get the mountain bikers off the track, or if we could find a way of improving things, like, for example, mirrors on corners and things like that, would that satisfy how you're looking at the situation, or do you definitely want them to be using different areas?
I think where there's a hazard,
Yeah, on the steep winding parts.
you just really can't mitigate it. That has to be. And what's happened is that the link track has already been publicized, and there are these little signs put up. So we have an ongoing situation right now that really needs to be rectified. And I don't think it's too great of an ask, because the mountain bikers have shown a lot of energy in creating new trails, and they just need to work a little bit harder. And there has to be a firm line that we cannot allow the ability of the public to walk in peace to be jeopardized in this way.
There's lots of mountain bike tracks that have got a no walking sign on them. So maybe we could have a walk track with a no biking sign. Just a thought.
Thank you very much. We've got our representative here who's dealt with you in the past anyway. Okay. And we're coming up on our long-term plan as well. So these sort of discussions are really helpful for us setting direction. So thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Right, so we'll move on to our minutes. Now, on those, we do have, it was mentioned that the carry forward report will be coming in this session. Any other, those on the confirmation of the business?
I did take a couple of suggestions. Are very minor grammatical, typos to the governance advisor. I'm perfectly happy to move that the minutes be received with amendments as agreed. So that means that they can or cannot be. I mean, they don't have to be accepted. See what I mean. So I'll move that the minutes be received with amendments as agreed.
Seconded for that. Councillor Wolstein.
I'm Chair. I'm just a bit nervous about skeptic minutes that are not in front of us and not knowing what the amendments are. If they're grammatical, that's fine. As long as they don't twist the existing minutes. Okay. Yep.
Through you, Madam Chair, yes, the matters are grammatical only.
Okay.
And if there is any attempt to change the meaning, then I would go to the Chair for further direction, which I'll just ensure myself.
Right, thank you. No, I appreciate that. Thank you.
So if we're happy, I'll put that. All in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, that's carried. Now I'll just welcome Ian Kircher on Zoom. And move on to the news report. Hopefully, yes. Just there, he's responding right now. He's in and out of meetings. So, right, we'll come back to the news report and we'll move on to the executive report.
Yeah, I'll take the report as read.
Right, so. Councillor Wolstein.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Power, for your report. And I was interested in your couple of references you made in there. One under the RMA reform on page number 33, going to page 34. Second paragraph, page 34, where you comment that the joint committees and combined plans may increase the pressure for local authority amalgamation, which was a matter outside the scope of the review, the one that was commented on nevertheless. There's a similar comment further down on the same page where, while outside the scope of its review, the panel noted much to be achieved by rationalising local authorities along regional lines. Would you care to comment any more on that?
Yes, well, I mean, this is something that some picked up on, and I think it's very important to be aware that these sorts of as you know, they with a potential, if not likely, divestment of the water's activity away from councils, that tends to, that will have an effect on councils' core capability. There may be movements in the future to do a similar thing with rating. We already have a shared arrangement in relation to NZTA. Running a state highway system and local authorities. So as these new entities, if and when they do start to take effect around the country, then it will raise some questions about the viability of some smaller local authorities, and that's something that local communities need to be aware of, because it does fly in the face of localism and the generally accepted advantages of having local decision making made by local people who understand their priorities.
Yeah, thank you. If I just respond, thank you, Mr. Power, for that. And yeah, it concerns me because I think at the present time, New Zealand has about 88% of our tax revenue controlled by central government, tax including rates, which is way above the average for the OECD. So we're already one of the most centrally governed countries in the world. And this looks like the plans could be to make it even more so. So put more authority in central government and less authority in local government, which is a very backward step in my humble opinion.
And I'm sure local government New Zealand is very alert to this evolution.
Hope so. Thank you.
Yeah, Councillor, I have a couple of questions, but while we're on the subject that Councillor Wallstein has raised, I was actually, like Councillor Wallstein, very disturbed by what we've seen in the CEO's report on pages 33, 34 and 35, especially in the light of what the Mayor had said about localism and the way we've been, in my view, clearly contemptuously treated. And I mean, the Mayor's report is blunt, it's outspoken, and it's absolutely right. Now, I noticed on page 35 that you know, we have not been, the allocation of funds hasn't been equitable, reasonable, or in our case, even evident. But Fergus, you make the point on page 35, the inherent signalling of further broader local government reform means that it is important that council consider its position vis-a-vis localism and engagement with LG&Z and government over this issue. Now, I believe it's actually important to actually signal this before the election, so there's no suggestion of political partisanship on our part. So I would like to move, based on what you've said, Waitaki District Council signals its support in principle for localism and its desire to explore opportunities to join with other TLAs to engage with LG&Z, the government and the public on the matter. Oh yes, I'm moving that Waitaki District Council signals its support in principle for localism and its desire to explore opportunities to join with other TLAs, territorial local authorities, to engage with LG&Z, the government and the public on this matter. Thank you.
Just speaking to that, I think it is something we're doing anyway, to be fair.
Yes.
In so many ways, and you can see that very much through the Mayor's report.
Correct.
His work on National Council is that. So it's certainly, I think we probably all share those sentiments, but it's certainly something we're working on, but it doesn't hurt to keep that in the notes. Is there any other comments on that?
Well, just speaking to it, I absolutely endorse what you've said, and I recognise that we are doing, as if you like, we've made views, but this is, if you like, a formal declaration of position. That's really the subtle difference.
Thank you, Chair. Look, I agree as well. I don't want to repeat what everyone else has said, but I recall saying way back in February that this is the most important and significant issue facing all local councils in New Zealand at the moment. And I wholeheartedly agree with Jim and with Colin and what they're saying. And I think we need to start putting the pressure on in a really wide way, locally, in discussions with our communities. I've already started talking to people about my thoughts, and the commentary that's coming back is really pretty sour in terms of this thinking. And I don't think it's good enough. And when I read the CEO's report and the Mayor's report, you can see the themes that are coming through, and I don't think they're good things. They really aren't. So wholeheartedly support to the speakers. I just wanted to say that because I'm totally in favour of that. Let's go on.
It's good to see both our Mayor and our CEO being courageous in the discussion.
Yep, be courageous.
I said the Mayor is here. Does he want to add to that at all?
Morning. Yeah, sorry, I was otherwise occupied just before. The motion does endorse what is happening, and I'm pleased to support it as that endorsement. There is a discussion that we need to have as part of the long-term plan and make sure that we are really clear to our community what democratic well-being actually is. I'm preferring to use that term rather than localism, because it is about, you know, how well our democracy works, and there is a challenge to us, and making sure that we actually engage better with our community and make sure that the decision making is coming more from grassroots. But it's a challenge that I'm up for. We have to, as a council, I think, have a better discussion on what exactly that means. But it's something where if we can come to an agreement and get support from the community, it will produce better outcomes than what happens now. We're already filling the gaps that central government, ministries and so forth are leaving. And if we can fill those gaps and actually do more, actually be legislated to have a formal role as a partner, not just as a service delivery agent, then that's going to be the true future for local government.
That being said, I'll put that in motion. Do we need it repeated? Is everyone clear on that? Yep. I'll put that motion. All in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
And against? That's carried. Right. And Councillor Hopkins, you have a few other things on the board to raise?
Well, just a couple of questions very quickly, if I may. On page 37, third paragraph, council will be required to give effect to Te Mana Oti-Wai by prioritising the health and well-being of water over the needs of people and other users. Is that, and that's quite significant, very significant in terms of its implications. And B, I'm just wondering, do you believe that's an accurate summary of what?
Well, that is the law today. So
should we be telling people about it a little more clearly, do you think, or not?
Well, this is something that probably affects regional councils to a greater extent than local communities. But our plans, of course, need to be not inconsistent with regional plans. And obviously, in relation to the freshwater package regulations, they came into effect on the 3rd of September 2020. And our planning team needs to be conversant with those and ensuring that we're actually following the law.
Well, two other very quick questions. The Crown Pastoral Land Reform Bill, it surpassed me, but has it had its first reading yet? And if so, are we going to submit? Have we submitted? I know the closing date hasn't been announced.
I can't tell you whether it's had its first reading, but I'll check that and report back to councillors on that.
This year it's had its first reading on the 22nd of July, and based on the document you're giving the attachment to the report, and it's at the select committee stage at the moment. That's how I read this.
Right.
That's the second reading.
But if it's at the second, well, we need to check the okay. So it's just very quickly and finally, that reference to the injuries to staff, 4 injuries to staff, included abuse of staff by the same member of the public. So was that all 4 in relation to psychological injuries, or?
I prefer not to talk about those. But you can rest assured that we're taking those issues very seriously, and police are involved.
Well, it is in the report. That's why I wrote that. Yeah, that's one. Thank you for your answer.
Right. Has anyone else got any questions or comments on the CEO's report? Right.
Yeah, just like to highlight and congratulate Lady Brown on the excellent reputation scores, going from a 2 out of 10 in 2018 to a score of 8 out of 10 in 2020. This means that the council is working together with the community for better success.
Yeah, those are very high reputation scores, and council can be justifiable. The two community boards, and when many scores are very high, it's often a temptation to that perhaps a little bit lower and feel that we're not doing terribly well. But in fact, the Ahuriri Community Board is only 3 points below excellent. So for many places around the country, they would regard that as a wonderful outcome. Obviously, do need to do some work in relation to the Waihima Community Board and to assist them to engage better so that their value is well understood by their own communities. But I'm very, very pleased with it. It's a testament to the professionalism of all of the staff and of you as councillors who get this off.
Right, can I have someone move it? There's Councillor Hopkins. Right, I'll put that all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And against, that's carried, and we'll move back now to page 18, the news report.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So just can you come back to me, Leah? I've got a scheduled radio interview now, so sorry. Just need to grab that. Thank you.
Right, so
What if we said no?
we'll move on to page 48, recommendation for the committees. All right.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Just a couple of amendments to make to these bylaws as a result of the Assets Committee meeting 2 weeks ago now. So there is clarification around the reduction of the OHAL roads down from 80 to 60, and clarification that goes to the entrance of the OHAL station, which is about 10 kilometres further on in the dock camp. On the gravel section road there. And second change is just around the requirement of permit for weddings with further on, where the driving stock, that is clarification that all areas that are restricted to less than 100 kilometres an hour, driving stock is prohibited without a permit. So obviously there is a number of roads now in the rural area that are less than 100k, and so that just clarifies that driving can be still permitted in those areas, but this you do need a permit. After that, they remain the same.
Right, we have any questions?
Yeah, look, just, a couple of questions. Well, one in general. I wasn't at the Assets Committee meeting, not a member of it. But were the committee members told that the new speed limits reflect submissions and go no further than what was asked for by the public, or are there changes that don't reflect the submissions?
No, all the information presented to the Assets Committee as a result of submissions, and of that.
Right. So there's nothing in here that, shall we say, we've come up with of our own tool without, shall we say, being guided by the public.
Yeah, so how the process works, as you're aware, it's been a lengthy process out to the public. So the original changes proposed were generally as a result of customer requests that have been up to 5 years ago. So they've been sort of stockpiled by officers and able consideration. There may have been a couple originally proposed by officers due to either trying to make routes cohesive, not the 60 kilometre, 80 and a 60 sort of thing, but those were all resolved on with the community and feedback sought. There's been no other changes made that hasn't had the public to improve.
I have a question also, if I may, about the voting bylaws, but can I just tease out Mr. Rawlinson, with your permission? I'm just wondering, the 40k speed limit on Harbour Street. First of all, it seems to me that's too high in practice, given the speed that vehicles actually travel on that road. And secondly, I recall that some time ago, there was a submission made by a retailer on the street at the time, not there now, but he proposed, if you like, treating it as a service lane with a speed limit of 15k. And I suppose I'm wondering really if it's not time to look at that as a speed limit on that street and why we haven't considered that as part of this change.
Madam Chair, yes, we had quite a discussion on that in the Assets Committee meeting, and it was determined that it was much better to try and keep a consistent speed limit in the area. And also there was quite a number of submissions, some submissions that did not want signs with a different speed limit for Harbour Street, which then would require the legal signs, which are not particularly heritage looking for the street. So in the assets report that went up, it was suggested that it would be far better to control speed in Harbour Street using other matters, like cars and stuff like that, to control the environment rather than speed limit as such. It's certainly not anticipated people will be doing 40k an hour in Harbour Street.
So your advice to the Assets Committee was essentially to create a heritage precinct speed limit of 40k more or less.
Correct, yeah.
Just one other question to you. Do you think it might be appropriate to hold off the Thames Itchen Street 40k limit until we determine the outcome of discussions on the end of the southern end of Thames Street? No?
I think we've got the speed limit review discussion in front of us now, and we need to make those calls. And if anything needs to change through any other discussions.
Oh, that's fine. Okay.
Thank you, Chair. A question, Neil, probably the definition of berms, cultivated and otherwise. And I took hold of the notes on this last night, and for some reason it disappeared. I think I might have to jinx it against Hopkins laptop, iPad. But the definition of berms, and I'm thinking particularly of those townships in our district that don't have footpaths or any degree of guttering around the streets. Where does the definition of a berm start and finish in relation to where you can and can't park? Because in Otamatata, for example, which I know really well, there's a huge amount of the township that doesn't have any footpaths, any berms, and so cars are parking rightfully so, almost right up to their fence line. So that's a berm in some kind of definition, but in the bylaw, that's not defined. I'm only relating my question now to this bylaw and how that affects townships that don't have footpaths, berms, and you've got to park everywhere. That's the way it's been for many years, I'm sure. Any thoughts on that?
Sure. I mean, there's no perfect rules that are going to cover every scenario. And of course, the bylaws are here for protections of, I guess, private or council property, but also the lot of council property outside of private property. And so in many cases, of course, people pay that high regard and are very careful and make sure they don't damage berms. This rule is really for those cases where someone is really creating an issue and where about it. So not used particularly often, but it's there for the protection of when people are actually extremely careless and disregard a berm outside someone's.
Good to have that recorded, thank you.
But you are making criminals of some of us.
Yeah, Neil, the attached maps and the area highlighted in yellow, is that indicating to us just the road or the extent of the limit? Because I noticed on page 73, southeast of the Five Forks School, you've got Kakanu Valley Road marked, but that's actually, I believe a paper road and only access to Johnson's Farm. But you've got it marked as part of the restricted area or recommendation of speed limit. So are there all the other maps more accurate than that?
Sorry, I'm just on page 73 and it looks okay.
So I'm just,
Oh, sorry. Yeah, no, that is gravel way. We can check that out for you.
well, it's just that I'm questioning the accuracy of all the others.
Right.
So, but I'm sure they are because they look to be accurate enough.
Yeah. Yeah, certainly intended the maps to be accurate, but unfortunately the error may have been made.
Yeah.
But certainly with the words, that's not the case, and we'll make a correction.
Thanks, Neil.
Yeah, that should have gone around the floor, I think. Not very, well, probably Mr. Harrison's just walked in, but it might be a bit cold on the question. But we'll make sure it's correct in the published version.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Hopkins.
Yeah, just, you know, looking at the the bylaw on parking, I'm sorry, apologies, but we seem to have different definitions of motor vehicle in a couple of the bylaws. One relates to hovercraft and articles of furniture, and the other one, I think, and this one is different, and that appears on page 35, 135 of our agendas. But I'm more troubled by, we've got a definition of parking on that page, which only talks about metered spaces, and yet on other pages, 139 and 141, there's reference to time restricted zones or metered zones. And I'm serious about this. It just strikes me reading it that the way our definition is included, we would not be able to prosecute anyone who parked over time on a time restricted zone because our definition of parking only covers meters. And I'm wondering whether we shouldn't include time restricted zones in that definition on page 135. Because we do mention it elsewhere in the Bible as part of parking.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Hopkins. I guess we've had, I don't know, what was in front of council 3 times.
I haven't seen this one before.
Right, but it has been in front of council, and it's quite hard to answer those questions when we're hoping to get the sign off to this document today, and they've been raised previously. We have been through the documents. We do believe that they are legally enforceable, and that there may be some slightly different definitions, but we believe that the bylaws will do the job they're intended to do. I'm not able to answer your specific question around whether that particular issue creates an ambiguity or not. And it's unfortunate that it hasn't been raised previously, so we had a chance to have a look at it. And that is the point of going through a committee round and then having a council round to make sure we've got those questions answered. So the Assets Committee was happy with it, and that has brought it forward. And we believe it is enforceable.
Well, it's not coming into force till the 1st of November. It's perfectly possible if you get a second opinion to add those, some reference to time restricted zones in that definition if you wish.
I'm not sure if Mr. Harrison has had a chance to look.
I haven't had a chance to have a look at that, I'm sorry. We can certainly look at it and see what can be done.
Okay, I guess the best issue is if we're getting a resolution today, you don't have to leave the bylaws on the table for the next meeting to get an answer, because otherwise it's not going to be resolved.
They can be adopted.
Can I leave with you? Yeah, I'm there for a while. It's going to need to be clarified what the amendments are. So, the question is whether or not
Perhaps the advice would be maybe adopt it as is, and if there's an issue, we'll bring it back to the council. We don't believe there is. We believe it is legally enforceable, and if there is an issue, I guess we could bring that back for council resolution on any amendment. I'm not sure, but it's probably what I suggest.
I think that's probably the best way, because you don't always know when you're changing something and small bit what it looks like. So I think if we take it as it is and we've raised it now with officers and officers concerned around the validity of that, and they can come back. Councillor Monroe.
If that's how we're going to do things, I should just point out on page 135, metered multi-bay parking space. It doesn't read well. I think there's just a couple of words mixed up there. So I doubt at this stage you've got someone that's going to be going through this and proofreading the entire thing, but this was the final document. Yeah. Sorry. So we get that one as well.
Well, I personally, I would think that, again, spelling mistake or, use of a single verb or plural noun, those corrections are made in my view.
I believe that is the case, that we can make minor changes that don't change the intent of it. However, I'm just not sure on the matter you raised.
Chair, I'm happy to test the meeting, and but I'm trying to look for the recommendation. I can't see which page it might start. I'm happy to move it or adopt it, because this is the recommendation of the Assets Committee, which I'm not a member of either, but it has been debated, and I think if there are issues that can be brought to us later, that might help. So I'm prepared to move the adoption of this report.
Thank you. It's moved by Councillor Murphy, Councillor Holding. So I think there's been a couple of issues raised that our team can certainly go and have a look at, and if there's any change in meaning, and come back to us. Oh, picture. Waving hand around there.
Yeah. Thanks very much, Madam Chair. A couple of things. I wasn't sure where we ended up with the definition around cultivated, but certainly the dictionary definition means a lot more than just a mown berm, and so I think if it hadn't already been agreed that something more like maintained berm would be more appropriate. As far as the Harbour Street issue goes, I agree it would be great to have it signposted as a lower speed, but because of the reasons mentioned, I think it needs to be 40. But there are other things we can do around just managing traffic in there, with the placement of various elements of street furniture, so to speak. It's been done in the past, and we should be looking at the opportunities to help separate traffic from pedestrians who do tend to naturally walk along the road rather than the footpath in that area. So yeah, some work that can be done on that, and I'd certainly support that. And the rest of it, I think, has been well and truly gone over, submitted on, cross-submitted, and submitted again. So I think we've got something which is a pretty good result overall. And yeah, the sooner we can get on with it, the better.
So the maintained berm comment you made, what section exactly do you know? Is that,
That's the parking one, I think.
It is parking well, it's under the definition, I think, of berm in the start of the document.
And the different definitions of motor vehicle are in the first speed limit one, and the second one on parking. There are different definitions citing the 1998 Act of a vehicle. So you need to, they're just things that can be looked at before we sign them off.
Madam Chair, point of
well,
order.
I think the issue is that we are signing them off
Yes,
today.
yes, I know, yes. But sorry, but they can be brought back. But I believe probably we should. There were a whole series of recommendations, more than just adopting the report on 48, 50 and 51 and 52. And I think probably the council needs to vote on those recommendations to it today, now.
I was going to ask the same question, Madam Chair. So is the President moving just for 6.11? That's what's been moved, not the whole.
I took it as 1 to 6.
Yeah, which is only 6.11. Yeah. And then 2 pages later, there is 6.12.
Yeah, so we'll take them page at a time to make it nice and clear.
Thank you.
Councillor Holt.
Just in regards to the Harbour Street, just thinking about that, is there any actually risk to council there by having that speed? If someone decided, I'm going to go 40 through the area, obviously it would be an accident waiting to happen.
Is there a risk to council for corners that can't be taking it at 100? Like I don't see it being any different.
Yeah, no, if you come.
Yeah. It is a legal requirement to drive for the conditions, and so if you're driving recklessly, even if it's within the speed limit, you can still be charged for dangerous driving.
So, Madam Chair, I think we should move the recommendation that, starting with the words that council one having regard to sections 155, etc., on page 48. I think we should move that resolution 1 through 6 that you and the Mayor moved at the Assets Committee meeting. I really do.
Yeah,
That's what I think too.
yeah, that's what's being moved.
Oh. No, you just moved that the report be received.
I should adopt. So we're adopting
1 through 6.
1 through 6. Yeah, that's a whole lot.
Oh, okay. So you move it's a recommendation, not a report.
Sorry.
Sorry, I misunderstood you.
So 1 through 6 on page 48. Any other questions or comments on that? I'll put that all in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? It's carried.
I'll move the recommendation on page 50, Chair. That starting with the words that council agrees to the implementation of changes, etc., etc.
Page 50, 1 through to 4.
Second up.
Any comments on that one? That all in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
And against? It's carried.
There's 113 on the group name, page
Yeah.
page 52.
No, 51 column. There's one on 51 column. Yes.
There's just a slight wording change without the required council provided in blue on page 51.
You can move it to that one.
Okay, so do we need to move? Yes, additional recommendation to council, just hope. Okay, so council, don't you
The page 51, additional officer comments.
Additional recommendation to council.
Council approves the film. Yeah.
Oh, I say, oh, yeah, right, yes, yep.
I'll second that if Colin.
Yeah, I'm going to move it, yeah.
And moved down, councillor
I'd like to
Wilson,
second it,
seconded
yeah,
councillor
on page, yep.
Hopkins. Any discussion on that point? All in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
And against? That's carried. Then on page 52, I'll take the movement to councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
For 1 and 2, seconded councillor Milmine. Any discussion on that? All in favour, please say aye. And against? That's carried. Right, are you happy to now?
Yes, I think I heard what you said. So yeah, if we go back to my report, so apologies for that. It is a wee bit crazy up here at the moment. So yeah, reporting live from Tysel. So thanks for looking after the meeting, Councillor Tavendale, appreciate that. As far as the situation here goes, just to report on that, you know, there's been a lot of work going on, and you know, just really want to pay tribute to the firefighters and the helicopter pilots and all of the FENS personnel, all of the civil defence personnel, and so many in the community who are stepping up and helping the people of Ohau. And yeah, it's, you know, it all overshadows everything else really that's in my report just for this week. There's some really positive news, which is that while the council was overseeing rural fire, the plan for the Lake Ohau village was developed, the fire plan, and it's that plan that was put into action and helped make sure that people did survive. I believe it was Steve Cooper and Chris Rain at the time that did the original plan, and it's been updated every year since then. And in fact, the residents had contacted FENS last week to say it's time to have another look at it and make sure it's up to date. So between a bit of luck, between quick reactions and a lot of bravery, you know, we did have a situation where no one got hurt. There are still animals missing, and you know, pets missing and so forth, and hopefully they'll be found safe. But the fact that no people were injured is a minor miracle, and thank you to everyone. Everyone from the person who got woken up and went and put the siren on, the fast response from residents getting out, knocking on neighbours' doors, making sure that people were safe and were got out of there. I'm pretty sure the proposed 60km/h speed limit on Lake Ohau Road would have been exceeded by some extent as people raced to get out of there. But special mention to Craig in Lake Ohau Village, who was the last person out and made sure that everyone else was out and actually travelled through flames to get out. So there's a lot of stories of bravery like that, and you know, it's all very moving. And you know, to go back with people of Lake Ohau Village yesterday and the buses as they drove around, they weren't allowed to get out, but they drove around to see their, you know, whether their homes were there or not, and what was left of them. Yeah, it's a very sobering moment. It's one of the worst things that I've had to do, but it was good to be there for the people. And you know, they're just such a great community of people who are really bonded together and looked out for each other. So thank you, big thank you to our team up here, Murray Linwood, who's the controller for us here, Lisa Bailey, Michelle, Ryan, Carol Hanson, Chloe, Searle, and one more, I think. Sorry, I can't remember. They, yeah, they've taken over from Mackenzie District welfare function, and they're doing a great. Mackenzie did a fantastic job, and our team stepped up and doing a great job as well. So yeah, it's very much a situation at the moment of looking at how we do the recovery. There's a lot of cleanup, the work that's to be done, and we're working on how that might look, and a lot of people intending to rebuild. So anyway, that's a bit of an update overall of what's happening up here. As far as the rest of the report goes, yeah, I think the most important thing really is around the I'm going to have to go again, sorry. It's around localism, so, but you've talked about that, but yeah, excuse me while I grab this one. Thank you.
A very busy year there at the moment, and I think he's certainly stepped up, and his role's been pretty amazing as well. Thanks to a lot of other people, but I think he's made, he's really pushed to make sure he can give anything he can, and I think he speaks a lot of truth when he says it's a pretty incredible community up there, and
no, like I was there all Sunday, and it was quite a emotional involvement really, and a lot of the people that were there I knew, and I think it serves me right, almost all the ones that I know, houses were destroyed, and so that brought the group of people that I've had most of my dealings with very close, and even to tell a story of one of the people up there saying that the fireman gave me a pair of socks, didn't have any sock, guy came out in Gumberries, went to the local shop and bought a pair of jandals, and little stories like that, you know, where do we get underwear from, where do we get our toiletries from, all those sorts of things. Like community up there, pharmacy opened up, Square team, both teams up there were very, very good. And CDM group of people were just outstanding in my view, and I thought the updates to everybody was very, very good, and it was very well balanced and very honest in how they said what it was like. And so while I wasn't there yesterday, I saw television coverage on it last night, which just looked quite devastating. And, but there does seem to be really strong resilience up there that people what they want to do. And it was nice to be there on Sunday, and it's really, really good that Gary is continuing to be out there. It's very important from our district's perspective. It's our furthest away part of our district, so it's really nice to be there to support that. And I've said to Gary, it's anything else I can do because I'm the closest. I'm very happy to help anyway. So yeah, it was good to be there.
I'll just mention that our CEO and Jordan have headed out to an EOC meeting now too, so. Right, so noting that he's not talking to us at the moment, any other questions or comments?
Yeah, Chair, I do have a question, please, and it's just an observation. When you click in on page 22 to the McKinley Douglas report, you get there's a 28-page document, which is interesting to read, but go to Appendix 2 at the end, and this kind of perturbed me, but under Appendix 2, where all the submitters made their contribution to the report, there are only 2 South Island submissions in that report that I can see. I don't know where the individuals come from, but from a council perspective, there's one from Christchurch City Council and one from Ashburton District Council. And I just wondered, do we make a comment about that at all? Any input into this report? Doesn't look to me as though we have, but I just wonder whether anybody knows. Maybe we don't. But just a question of Gary was here, I would have asked him, but
Not that I'm aware of. And
so he's gone. So just a question for later, maybe somebody can answer that. Thanks very much. Yeah.
Well, Madam Chair, through you, you and I both went up to that local government New Zealand conference on localism a couple of years back now. I think that was and reported back to council, and I think the decision was made at the time to engage and promote the idea. And I think that's been done. Whether we made a submission on this particular document, I don't know, but certainly advocacy has occurred through the mayor and others at rural and provincial level and at local government level. So I think Waitaki's engaged and connected and lobbied.
Yeah.
Whether they did it, whether we did on this in this particular instance, I don't know. I can't comment on that, but I can comment on other forums.
I don't believe we formally did this occasion, but as Councillor Hopkins brought up, the localism event that we attended was quite a few government and local government people all in one place, and they spent a lot of time working through some solutions, some ideas and things. So there's probably been a lot of feedback that came from that forum.
Well, just raising it again to reiterate what others have said about an hour ago, that this is very significant to all local councils and putting their own Waitaki district hat on. We've got to reinvigorate local democracy rather than have it taken off us. I think that's the key thing, having it taken away from us by people that we don't have any control over, basically.
This one, of course.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, just on the same topic in the comment report. In localism, I'm in the middle of page 25, and just I thought it was a line that rang true to me, and just said it's very much the principle often articulated in discussions about community governance that it should be based on nothing about us without us. Yeah. That's a very good point. That's what I think. That's what our ratepayers probably tell us all the time, that they want to be involved with us as well. And we are telling central government the very same thing, that we want to be involved also. And because if things go much worse than what they are now, 88% central government control now, well, getting towards countries like China maybe isn't that far ahead of us. That's an exaggeration, I know, but I think we need to withstand any centralisation of government with all our vigour and power.
Just going back to page 22, very, very briefly, for the benefit, perhaps for the benefit of newer councillors, that purpose clause at the top of the page is actually the old national government one, penned by Nick Smith. B's now been replaced by promoting social, cultural, economic and environmental well-being. So the 4 well-beings are back in the purpose clause now, replacing what was there in B. Whether it means anything actually, in fact, is a moot point. But the wording has changed.
I just want to fully support what the Mayor has said on page 21 underneath 11.3 shovel-ready projects. I think he shows great fortitude writing these words in this report, and I just want to thank, formally in our minutes, thanked him for being so strong and a very difficult subject for him to grapple. So yeah, very good.
I must admit, I listened to a radio advert for a party talking about provincial growth funding and how much it's done for regional New Zealand. And I thought it was probably a waste of money being spent here locally, that radio advert, because provincial growth funds has done very little for our own community. So, Councillor Grover.
Sorry, thank you, Chair. Just one more thing. I think the key words on that page are duty of care. And every piece of legislation we see, the words duty of care almost highlighted through almost all the apps that we look at, one way or another. When it's dealing with people, duty of care. When it's dealing with assets, duty of care. Fiscal responsibility, duty of care. And then we don't get the same duty of care given back to us on these projects, and that's appalling. That's absolutely disgusting. So I'm just very supportive of what Councillor Moore has just said as well, and others. Well done to the Mayor for writing this. Yeah, he's grumpy about it. I'm not. Yeah, we're all damn grumpy about it. Good on you, Gary.
Should we move that we're grumpy?
Now.
I move that the council is grumpy.
Right. We're going back to the original recommendation.
The chair didn't accept the resolution.
Right. We have thank you, Councillor Newton, seconder, Councillor Millmine. Any other discussion there? I'll put that all in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
And against, carried. Right, and we'll move right back down now to decision reports, page 182.
Oh no.
Mousing through this, Chair.
Yeah, we do have one other issue we're going to bring, at the end of the news report, which is around rates in Lake Ohau. But I think I would quite like the Mayor to be present for that discussion, so we might raise that. Procedure way to do that.
We can come back to it. You move the meeting back to that to have that extra discussion.
So we'll come back to that because I think that's a big good one to have. So page 182.
I'm happy to move recommendation 1, Madam Chair, and in fact I'm also.
Sorry, Councillor.
Oh, sorry.
So this is the Whitestone report.
Oh, is it? I thought we were on 182.
Oh, okay, sorry.
We'll come back. So the Whitestone, they are coming at 10:55. And taking New Zealand 10:15. So no, it's the still getting there. You're on road stopping too. Yes, we are.
Yeah. With your permission, Madam Chair, to move recommendation number 1, and if you allow 2 as well, a slight change for the record. I've moved an amended version of 2 reading as follows. The Council delegates to the Park Committee the development of a timetable for the implementation of the next steps recommended by Crow Hall in the extract from its risk management policy report. Just to be clear, page 182. There's 2 recommendations.
These information, so you're changing that recommendation number 2.
Just slightly. Just for the purpose of clarity, that's all.
Have you gone?
I'm moving that council adopts.
I'll get straight to page 182.
Yes, it's all the right.
Risk management.
Road namings come after that.
Yep.
Okay, 182.
So,
I will just wait for a second.
sorry, forgive me. It's recommendations.
Yeah, there's another one from the Essex.
This one, this is one.
Page, please.
So we got lost in the middle of all the,
Yeah.
Where we have to go back to?
Waitaki Road.
We did that one.
Did that one, yeah. The closure of the road.
Yes, we did do that one.
Right. So I will move. One, that council adopts the updated risk management policy. And two, council delegates to the Power Committee the development of a timetable for the implementation of the next steps recommended by Crowe Horwath in the extract from its risk management policy report.
okay, so we have a second for that.
I think Jeremy said, oh, Peter did, all right.
Councillor Dixon?
Sorry.
Sorry, I just have one question. I believe that Crowe Halls have changed their name. Whether we need to change that in the resolution
Tell me what
to
to do.
Findex.
So,
They've changed their name to Findex.
recommendation by Findex in the extract from its risk management policy report.
Correct.
Its name on it, so my recommendation is to stay with that.
Well, Crowe bracket now Findex.
And then second, Chair.
Sorry.
Then Councillor Holden.
Yeah.
Right, any discussion on that?
Highly controversial matters, Madam Chair. We can debate them for hours.
Right, well, I'll put that all in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? It's carried.
Sorry for the confusion.
So we'll leave what's going conflict page, so we'll move on to page 235.
Excuse me, Chair, sorry, is that the resolution, sorry, I might have missed this, on page 182 regarding initiating the search for an independent member. So you're going to delay that? Oh, you're going to delay that now? Yeah. If the chair of the Power Committee can just talk about that maybe.
Well, yeah, thank you, Ross. Raising, I introduced that one, that all were covered under 7.11, covered all three of those resolutions. Oh, I'm sorry, it was my oversight.
Yes, you can do, through your
So,
manager,
yeah,
you can do them separately, but they weren't moved separately. Councillor Hopkins moved one and was slightly reworded two. He didn't do
three.
Oh, okay.
202003.
An oversight on my part, I apologise. Did you intend to, Councillor?
I did, but I'm happy for you to now.
No, I'm happy for it to be included in your resolution, and it's as I thought it was. Yeah, that makes sense at all. I'm happy to move 2020 bar 036.
I'll second that, Chair.
So we're doing 35 and 36 or
Just
37.
it's done.
Yes, it's done, yes.
Councillor Hopkins moved the first one, receives the notes, then he put
36, 35 into.
yes.
Okay. Perfect, so that's moved by Councillor Wilson, seconded Councillor McGrovey. Any other comments on that? All in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
And against? Carried. Now back to 235. Road naming Observatory Village. Councillor Harley, would you like to move that?
No, I just have a question just in regards to whether we undertook some cultural due diligence around the naming of streets in Te Reo with local iwi.
I'm not aware that we do. No. Probably.
It would be quite important if we at least just received some guidance around that.
Yeah, thanks, Hannah. Just to point out there, under background, there is Waitaki District Council Road Naming Policy 2017. At the bottom of page 235. So we need to refer to that policy to see whether that policy does apply in that respect.
I don't believe from memory in that policy. I think that's probably question. Yeah, right. Probably we should be taking more into account.
The street, it does run off Remove Crescent. Whether there was any either consultation about that or adverse reaction to it, I don't recall. Certainly the latter, can't speak to that. But at least one of the streets in the village has already received a Māori name for a native tree.
I guess as was asked by the Runga, what don't we know about? So it's not necessarily always going to be what they haven't complained about, as much as should have been more proactive. And maybe because this is still making it the stage, obviously, at the stage of discussion to have that maybe we need to do a policy around road plan to make sure we do pass one that pass by them right. I'm not sure if everyone's comfortable with for this stage or
Yeah, thank you. The comments from the chair. Just referring to one on page 237, the last paragraph there, just say that these name options have been decided on the village life here, village development team and directors, but also discuss the village resident meetings and are supported by the current village residents. My memory of the naming policy, and I stand to be corrected, is that it's up to the developer to actually provide the council to approve those names. So I think if that's our current policy, then that's what we need to do in this case. But I agree entirely with Hannah's point of view that we should perhaps review the policy, see whether there is a change that should be made to it. But I guess we have to act under the policy as it is now.
I'm happy with that too, but I do think the policy could be reviewed, and I think it would be very opportune to involve our local iwi in helping us give guidance to the policy. So on that basis that this has come to us, I'll be happy to move the recommendation without it being subject to, because it does appear to meet our policy. But I might have an extra recommendation, second recommendation, that we have our policy reviewed. I'm not tracking that from a governance perspective, but so I'll move the.
So I'll foreshadow this, but take that first one. Secondly, Councillor, and I'll take Councillor Mine's question.
I was just going to make a comment. I mean, I think we're all heading in the right direction here. Fully support Councillor Wilson and Councillor Murray are suggesting that we do consult and talk about policy, but we also need to be very careful that we don't make it difficult to use these names. And put too much technicality behind a commonly used New Zealand Māori word.
I'm against supporting this in principle just because of the current hui that we actually went to on Sunday. It was quite significant for local iwi to be included with matters of cultural significance. And I think this is just an example that we actually need to follow through. So I won't be supporting this in the current state until we get some guidance from them.
Yeah, I'm in two minds about this. We could vote on it today and then review the policy, or we could just say, well, let's let it lie on the table and explore the issue that's been raised before we reach a final decision. And personally, I would prefer that latter approach. I think it's more sensitive and more appropriate and reflects the views around the table and also the issues that Councillor Heller has referenced in relation to our conversation with the Remaker on Sunday. I don't think it violates the policy or the process to just wait for a bit and do one more check or have one more conversation. So, you know, I listen to what others say.
Yeah, I'm tending to support Councillor Hopkins and Councillor Hannah Lally on this one. I don't think it's such an issue that we can't delay it for a short period of time and at least have a phone call discussion with the Remaker and look at the policy. Yeah. It might only take a phone call, but it's not do or die as far as I'm concerned. And laying it on the table is not a silly idea.
And yeah, I tend to actually agree with that way of looking at things. I think we are within our policy, and I understand that, but we had a very frank and free discussion and a real recognition that we need to do better at working together with our local runanga, and they've got the treaty, we've got treaty obligations there, and we have, this is probably the first area since then that's come up that is quite obvious. It's probably not actually a difficult one for us to start with. Our policy, I believe, will need updated, but in the interim, I think correspondence would be a really good start, and we can hold this one meeting to make that phone call. I think it would just show good faith. So I'll be there. Anyone else want to speak? Right, I'll put the motion. All in favour, please say aye. And against? Right, that's long. So I'll move from
Mayor.
I'll move from the chair that this lies on the table. I won't go on to the reasons at stage because I'm just looking at, I know Councillor Groby has done it. Motion. Seconded Councillor. So any discussion on that? I'll put that. All in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? It's carried. And I'll move to Councillor McRoby to around the policy.
Yes, I will move that the road naming policy be reviewed to take into account all the factors, all aspects of their communities involved.
I wonder whether that's just a wee bit too open. It hasn't been very long since we've done the digital policy. I believe it was in the 12 months. So maybe we need to talk about just our treaty obligations in regard to the policy.
Just perhaps cultural appropriateness.
Cultural appropriateness.
It's taken into account the cultural appropriateness of our practices.
I'm getting that.
So
I think that just makes it really clear it's only a portion of the policy. Yeah, right, is everyone comfortable with that? So I'll put that motion. All in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
And against? That's carried. Tiger Museum, great period.
Sure, we're going to be able to move to 7.4.
We're on 7.4, we're going on.
I will happily move 241.
Page 2.
The recommendation on 241, I should say.
You please have the agenda item.
Oh, I'm sorry, forgive me. It's 7.4 road landing home civil estate.
All right, so 7.4 has been moved.
No, second. Can I ask one clarification first? Can you explain in 7.3 and 7.4? When the previous no road naming was left the line.
I can
This is.
That's the way. Don't have it lying on the table. We don't have a second for that motion. I mean, don't have it being passed right now. Do we have someone that wants to have it lying on the table?
So, sorry, just proving the name of Holmes Hill Estate.
Yeah, recommendation.
Yeah, I'm happy with that.
No, well, if you move it,
Second
I'll
it,
second
second it, sorry.
Seconded councillor Holden. So just, I'll open up for discussion. Councillor Norman.
Yeah, and they totally agree with what Councillor Wilson says. How can we approve one if we've got to relook at our policy and open it to everything that's involved with our policy? Then we can't possibly naming roads right now. So it has to run.
Just going to agree with Councillor Wilson and Councillor Newline on that too.
Personally, I mean, it's different. I mean, the other, a councillor, Councillor Hillary, raised an issue relating to an engagement we have with Runa in respect of another naming proposal. In this instance, the people who, all of the arguments that apply, the first one apply here, and you have the additional argument that relates to the farm, to the history, to the fact that the person who originally occupied the land was a farmer who specialised in breeding and selling Clydesdales. It's entirely appropriate in that sense. Very difficult to see how it might cause offence or objection anywhere. And to the extent that it's not something that might be captured by the specific review of policy that we've just voted on. There's a motion from Councillor McRory. I'm personally happy to signal that in this instance we'd be comfortable with it. I acknowledge the points, but I don't believe that we need to be that particular or precious about this proposal in this context, and albeit that the matter, the cultural matter, has been raised by Councillor Hillary in respect of the observatory village name proposal. So I'll still vote for it. Aye. Yes or no?
I might do a show of hands on that. All in favour? Four in favour. All against? That's lost. So I'll move from the chair, and that lies on the table.
I'll second that, Madam Chair.
The councillor. Another discussion on that? Got that all in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Now we move to what same one? So we've got the New Zealand.
Right.
So meantime, what same one? Quite you guys forward.
Thank you very much.
Questions on that? The result very challenging.
Yeah, I think that's a very good summary. Started off very slow, got a head of steam, and just as we were starting to run with that, COVID struck and everything stopped for a good month for our construction work. We were fortunate to be able to go back at level 3, but one of the lasting legacies of the COVID has been that the number of projects that were available for tendering stopped during COVID level 3 and 4 and has been slow to get underway again. So all things being what they were, the end financial result was as good as we could hope for, I think. So anyway, everyone will have seen our written report and happy really to just answer questions from the council.
Well, yeah, well, I have a couple. I take it that the figure on page 195, 840,690, that's the basic net surpluses.
Your page number, of course, will be from your board.
Page 9 of your report.
Yes, correct.
Right.
Yep. Yes.
So, can I just ask, let me just go on in just a second. Looking at your page 12, I notice your revenue's down by about 4 mil. So's your expenditure. How long can you continue to sort of prune operational expenditures back by that amount? I mean, you've taken $4 million out of your operating costs. Logic would suggest that can't go on. What's your view on that?
Well, the operating expenses reduce as proportional to the revenue that you earn. So if we've earned less revenue, our overall costs are lower. Yeah, well, if you're doing less revenue, then you're not spending as much on plant materials and labour.
Right.
So.
Okay, all right. I might have been a disconnect between the two. On our page 217, there's a reference to gravel pits and the provision of page 31, provision of restoration for gravel sites. How many do you have that need to be restored?
At this stage, probably only just the one allowing for at this stage that requires restoration. And we did do at that site quite a bit of restoration during the year. So there's only a small balance there just for minor works now.
Look, my last question, through you, Madam Chair, is on your page 37. This is reference to the wage subsidy. You've got $809,685 from. How many jobs would you say? Are they still secured?
We had no job losses, so every job was secured.
So they're still.
In fact, we've taken on more staff in the last couple of months.
And that wouldn't be possible without the subject?
No, no, yeah, definitely not.
Significant plus for the company.
Yep.
Next year, a lot of congratulations on good year, given the circumstances of the last 3 months, and given your June balance date, there must be some good recovery appearing on the horizon. We hope so. So, can you give us a little bit of information about how you see the forward status of historical?
Yeah, quite. So you're looking for a bit of a crystal ball gaze of where things are heading. So the current financial year has started off as difficultly as the previous year, and in large part due to one of the issues I signalled a moment ago about the number of projects coming on the market for tender reduced significantly during COVID and immediately after, and the wheels are starting to turn now. Our current forward workload is solid, sitting at 19 million. The first 2 or 3 months have been challenging, but we're optimistic that we're going to start progressing well for the rest of the financial year.
So just in relation to also finding the competition that they want to previous still as difficult in terms of pricing, or a little bit more so to speak.
It's still very competitive, and we are selective in that we tender for as well. But overall, it's reasonably balanced, I guess.
Good result.
Yeah, thank you, guys. And congratulations on a result for the year, good result, which is not what you look at losing the year. So just a question which is very important to council as a shareholder is dividend. And I note on page 184, our papers, not yours. Clause 4.3 of the company's constitution includes the distribution of dividends, so no resolution is required. I see no provision for dividend in your financials. So can you perhaps comment on dividend, council, please?
Well, invariably that requires a resolution of the board, and we haven't yet met to do that, but it will be forthcoming in accordance with the statement of corporate intent.
So clause 4.3 doesn't apply.
We've just undertaken sort of an organisational review of ourselves through council market program, that's things like that. And one thing that they're stressing just the exposure from CCOs in health and safety. And how through the ISO you're pretty confident that council's not really open to too much exposure through your health and safety.
Well, we've got a long-standing program of health and safety with ISO accreditations. Well, Tony, you can probably elaborate and provide more detail around that.
Yeah, we've got a very comprehensive health and safety program really in place. We get audited every year against our health and safety program. The record has been very good, particularly over the last few years, and it's in the forefront of everything we do, really.
We, of course, employ a full-time health and safety officer, and in terms of board meetings, it's first item that gets discussed in terms of board papers. So it's just a given that it's a significant issue that has to be continually worked on by board management and the wider staff.
I think I was quite satisfied with how it was. We've just come up a couple of times to mention things.
Yep.
Any other questions?
Sorry, one final question, please, and an unusual question, probably on your page 27. Can you just tell me what that machine is actually doing?
The guardrail.
There it is.
No, it's the guardrail machine.
Guardrail machine. Yeah, putting in guardrails. Yeah.
Not that machine, but down as to that.
Yes. Yeah.
One thing I would like to perhaps add just a little bit on about is environmental issues. We've referred in the written report about a working group looking at environmental initiatives for the company. Since this year-end report was completed, we have now had our external audit of our environmental report, which means that we now have a base year level for our emissions production. The company is now registered as a carbon reduction certified organisation. And what all that means in terms of going forward is that we've set a series of targets around reducing electricity consumption, fuel use and waste to ground fill. So we've now got base measurements as to what we were for the last financial year and are looking to reduce those outputs for subsequent years as part of our environmental program. So that's becoming more and more of a significant factor for everyone. And that's really where the company's currently at. So there's been a bit of development in that space since this written report was prepared that you may be interested in.
Yeah, just one last question for me, just on page 24 of the audit report, which is operating costs. Fringe benefit tax is easily jumped from 120,000 to 130,000. I assume most of that relates to vehicles that are supplied to available for private use. Just a question on that, is there a salary offset against that fringe benefit tax? So there was a recovery by the company from the wages, if you like, salary?
Yeah, there's a value assigned to their total remuneration based on that vehicle that they've got and the use that they get.
Yeah, so some certain senior employees, it's part of their package.
Yes.
Yeah.
Receive a vehicle.
Yeah.
They'll have a salary reduction as an offset.
well, it's part of the total package. So yeah, it's how, I mean,
essentially it is.
Salaries are guided by advice we receive externally, and then how we complete the payment is a mixture of benefits. Some are purely financial, others are vehicles and other assorted items.
Just that it is quite a large amount, wasn't it? It's, yeah.
Right,
Yeah, look, since we're on page 24, I was going to ask this earlier, but I guess the drop in installation and construction revenue is sort of COVID and competition. I'm just wondering, what do you include as non-contract work, and is that the sort of the little jobs that you do for?
Yeah.
You seem to retreat from that space a bit. Is that a deliberate strategy? You used to advertise your services for that kind of work, but you're not now. Is that a deliberate company choice?
The private market work is probably worth around $1.5 million a year locally. Yeah, I mean, we try and maximise that as much as we can, and it's always a balance with the major contracts and the smaller work. But we have a dedicated crew to the smaller type work, and not only here, it's in all our other regions as well. So it's certainly a market that we explore.
So the drop is just the market, just the kind of that $2 million drop in non-contract is just basically what is dealt with by way of bad hand.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much. Congratulations and good luck. We get it done. Hopefully it goes.
Thank you.
And Newton. Any other discussion? Okay, all in favour, please say aye.
Aye. But that's 1 and 2, is it, on page?
Aye.
Lovely. Thank you. Thank you.
Now, I think the financial contribution might be a bit longer than what we've got. So we're on page 365, which is a pandemic report.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor.
Would you like to open the report?
Very good. I know you've got a busy agenda, so if I can take it as read and therefore take questions, a couple of lines summary on each of the elements. We continue to spend. Our general activity and output has been maintained. So overall, we haven't had many business closures in Waitaki since COVID, which is very encouraging. Our tourism estimates for the month of August, which is the latest data, were down 2% from July. So I think we're seeing a slight flattening at the moment of domestic tourism. Obviously, we benefited in the school holidays and post-COVID. Much of our spending is returning to that long run average. Some have stayed up, some are still behind. It's hard to read, and sometimes there's a local condition. So our home retailing is going quite well, but then again, we've just opened a mega mitre tent, and that may well influence the data in the last couple of months. It's harder to read on the people side what are causing some of the actions, because we can see some correlations with COVID, but we can't necessarily say its exact effect. So in general, there is some variability along a year, say for people looking for support to go and find a job. Definitely jumps in the COVID time. This has flattened out. Probably the biggest area where we've noticed people requiring support in Waitaki is in the accommodation supplement. So maybe that's where we can follow up with the recent work done on housing to see is there anything a council can do about this.
Thanks, Jerry. Councillors, any questions?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I just had one. Jared, on the first page, you talk about in the second paragraph under card transaction, clothing, footwear and department stores are showing a significant reduction, and yet If you go to the next page, where there are some minuses like accommodation and pharmaceuticals and so on, clothing, footwear and department stores, although the graphs don't show, is actually showing a 10.8% increase. So I'm just trying to make.
So that's the change in the latest week over the previous week, which you can see the black line is on an upwards trend. So compared to the previous week, it's gone up 10%.
So okay, gotcha. So that little pop up on the right hand side of the graph explains the 10.8%.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Only over a week.
Yeah, gotcha.
Yeah.
Sorry, thank you.
That's right. And if you look at retail, is probably one of the we've got a lot of regional data for Otago, which is obviously a little bit skewed by Queenstown's situation, but the notable displacement have been in retail, tourism, food and beverage. Dunedin's actually been a little bit hit by international student loss, but the things that also relate to Waitaki are potentially the viticulture, agriculture, horticulture and aged care, which is where we need more people. They've been affected in those areas.
Can you explain a little more on the accommodation supplement, just what that exactly means?
Yep. I would probably get a better answer for you from Helen Elgar, who can't be here today, but in fact, even Councillor Harley might be better positioned than I, but it is about people who are finding that baseline need to have the accommodation that's suitable for their situation, their family numbers, and who require direct assistance.
Yes, it is an additional top-up in addition to any other financial benefits that people are entitled to, depending on their criteria.
Major increase, yeah. Councillor Wolstein.
Yeah, thank you, Jerry, for your report. Just page 255, the graph on the left is food and beverage, the graph on the right is groceries and liquor. Two headings are very similar, but the results are taking reverse during the COVID.
Mm-hmm.
Can you just explain that please, as to what's under food and beverage and what's under groceries and liquor? Looks like in the reverse graph, everybody's stopped eating.
Yes.
Taking up drinking.
Yeah.
Which we did. I
couldn't possibly comment. However, groceries and liquor is generally supermarkets and four squares and stores like that, and independent liquor stores.
Mm-hmm.
And the food and beverage is mainly reflecting restaurants.
Okay.
And some suppliers of food that aren't through the big chains.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks, Jerry.
Yeah, just referring to your item on page 258 under the Provincial Growth Fund. It's good to see that pharmacy and sports halls getting a bit of a revamp. On that note, are there discussions, or have there been discussions through central government about what the plans are going forward in relation to that PGF? Either party, if
yes, I mean, largely at the moment it is election agenda manifesto. Current government is indicating a $200 million regional fund, and they've expressed that they want to have that target very much driven up in terms with regional plans to hit regional issues. So perhaps where the PGF has sometimes been quite specifically targeted into a feature, like say sports halls, maraes and churches, I think it's going to be an increasing need for us to work with the other districts in Otago to find what are the things that might be cross-district boundary that central government would like to invest in, perhaps things like waste minimisation or things like that.
Yeah, just a second question, Ross, on page 257 on your employment and welfare support. Just looking at the job seeker rec numbers, risen to 473. Year ago, in August, year ago, up to 282, and now 314. But then further down, job seeker health and disability benefits have risen and increased. A year ago, now 252. A year ago was 219. So there's a rise in people on job seeker benefits, job seeker work ready benefits, but also job seeker health and disability benefits.
Yes. Yeah, I can't get the causes of those due to privacy considerations, but it does reflect could possibly represent increased stress in the whole general environment that we operate in at the moment.
Yes, Mr. Connor is actually correct. It does include the mental health wellbeing as well. That has been included in the assessment of those benefits. And it indicates the level of mental health issues that are in our community.
And it may well be that some of this has been there, but the focus and the stimulus and the increased pressures suddenly make it very visible.
Now, put that all in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Yes, it's carried. And we'll stop. Okay.
I was asking Madam Chair, I wasn't asking you, Councillor McGrath.
I'm quite comfortable with Councillor McGravy speaking to me. So 259, Councillor Hopkins.
Thank you, Madam Chair. 259, Councillor McGrath.
He might have been there.
It's even.
Right. So I'm now moving to the Support and Stimulus Fund Decisions Update. And welcome back, Jared.
Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor. The tables provide a list of the decisions that have been made by both the Community Resilience and Economic Resilience Funds in our last round of assessments. There have been no requests to the Mayoral Relief Fund or hardship. In terms of the summary of the fund, we have about 447,000 left in the first tranche of funding able to be allocated. We have had some preliminary discussions with a couple of larger initiatives, which is encouraging to see, some based around employment services to actually try and address those job seeker numbers and things which are probably a little bit larger in scale than the ones we've received, but hopefully will have a lot of impact and good value for the application. We'll have to assess those as they come in.
Thank you. Councillor Newton.
Just one question through the chair. What's on this item on page 260? Can you explain what the Places platform is?
Yes, you can find it on the web or on phones. So it is a collection of places rather than just say restaurants or entertainment venues. It is take a place like Waitaki, 29 locations and businesses. It's a suite of social media posts, up to 300 social media posts for the businesses and sites. It is a map, physical map, because some people still prefer a physical map with information about each of them on it. And also they come down and create a set of video articles, which each of the places can use as their own collateral. So it's got a flow-on effect for each of the 29 participants.
Just wondering what sort of reach this platform has in terms of
numbers. Yep. There is I can't remember the number offhand. There is a validation paper provided by Neat Places, which I could forward to you. It is clearly visible on both the web and phone platforms.
Okay. Right, Councillor Holden.
Oh, just in regards to Councillor Newton's question, I think their social media has a following of 21,000. I think that proposal is for printed hard copies for businesses around the district to leave under the shops.
So the 14,000 is for paper, not social media.
So it will be on their social media platform of their business profile, and also we're making a hard copy pamphlet that can sit with businesses. So if you're shopping at one destination, you want to use the other by picking up those pamphlets.
And so the that award, the Neat Places organisation comes and does the whole amount of work, so interviews the businesses. That is a co-funding, so that the businesses themselves are paying half the cost of appearing on the platform.
And there was stipulation that they work with our business attraction and recovery manager around just making sure the businesses that are part of it have got a good reach and it sort of covers all bases. Right, councillors, any other questions on this report?
No questions, but this comment from the Community Resilience Fund, it's been a good uptake across a pretty broad spectrum of the community, cultural wellbeing, community groups that are adding to the vibrancy. So it's good that we've been able to support those things so far in the response to a disruptive year.
Councillor Hopkins? Do you have
No.
Councillor McGravy. Okay, moved Councillor McGravy, seconded Councillor Newton. Any other discussion? I'll put that. All in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? That's carried. Thank you very much. Right, and now back to contributions alternate approach, page 206. 246. Looking at me. Hamish, did you want to open this or?
Certainly. Well, what I would say is that financial contributions are a key revenue stream for parks and recreation. We have gone over some of the background to this paper at the previous committee meeting. All the options are really derived from what effectively amounts to the market value of up to 7.5% of land that comes about as a result of subdivision. And that's going to be with us for some time into the foreseeable future until the district plan. I think effectively the decisions come out and they're either agreed or it could even be longer into the future. So we are where we are unless we are wanting to promulgate a plan change. The system isn't broken. It is one that works and is comparable to some other councils, bearing in mind that all councils have different ways of funding this particular area, and ours has been based on these financial contributions for some time. Having said all that, the main options in front of us, there are no less than 5 different options. And look, I'm happy to go into detail. We canvassed many of them last time. The first option there, which effectively is one where there would be two values. One is an average for urban areas and one is an average for rural areas. The second one, which I believe officers are in support of, being value bands to give a little bit more fairness in a sense and differentiation depending upon whereabouts you are located in terms of the subdivision. Option 3 there is something that I think was discussed particularly last time. We're looking at having valuation reports continue, whereas options 1 and 2, effectively we're trying to reduce that transactional cost to applicants. Option 4 there is reducing the maximum amount payable. And option 5 is sort of the no change to what has been going on for many years there, which is in terms of the rural areas, 750 for a rural lot subdivision, 3,750 for rural residential, and the sort of 7.5% for residential and township zones. So to answer any further questions on this topic.
Thank you. Councillor Wallstein.
Yeah, thanks, Hamish. Just kicking it off from listening this morning from Becky. And he was going down the track where he said he wants to try and track where the money goes. So that's not his role. but he was saying that it's he thought a flat rate was more applicable, and he was saying that he was contending that the cost of the financial contribution is a disincentive to subdivision. So the figure should be lower. I think where I'm getting to was my question. But in trying to say that, the money is used for recreational FCs.
If financial contributions, yeah, it's used for recreational facilities.
Yes, yeah. So that someone, if you have a fee, a flat fee, then someone who is paying, doesn't matter what the value of your section of land is, you're paying the same fee across the board. And that contrasts with the rates, whereby if you have a high value property, you pay more rates.
Any comments in relation to the fairness of those two different approaches?
Well, I guess the district plan essentially looks at market value, and that's currently where we're at. A flat fee recognises market value less, but you've still got to derive a figure, and that's the interesting. But from what you're telling me, it sounds like he's in favour of option one, which would be a single fixed fee, one for urban areas and one for rural areas, based on average market value across the respective areas.
Yes, he didn't say the whole detail, but he said a fixed flat rate, which is a fixed fee. Yes.
Yeah, look, it would be easier to administer than potentially option two, or less complicated. But that said, there's, as you say, there are trade-offs in going down that approach. Notably, that land would be valued more or less the same in different parts. Even with the Oamaru, land is of a different market value. So that will lead to different land parcels being contested, and other land parcels where people are quite, well, yippee, sounds great. Yeah. So I think that sort of differentiates between the option one and option two.
Thanks, Hamish.
Right, we'll take Councillor Hopkins then Holden.
Yeah, look, I've got a couple of questions for Hamish and one for Fergus. Hamish, just looking at your report, there's a reference to other councils now looking at household unit equivalents as the basis on which they determine FCs. So can you tell us exactly what that means? Can you tell us what the Mackenzie Council's, District Council's approach to FCs is, given that they are the closest to us? And thirdly, I thought the amendments to the RMA were passed in July of this year, and that financial contributions have actually been reinstated. The report says they haven't been, and the amendments have gone to the House, but I heard it debate, and I'm sure the FCs are back in the frame, aren't they?
Well, in relation to that third question, that is my understanding, yes. So that needs to be clarified, that within this report, FCs are back. They were removed as part of the ALA bill and subsequently reinstated recently. So you are quite correct. I'm just wondering, Sherilyn, would you like to comment on Mackenzie's?
No, I can't recall off the top of my head. We did camp.
Well, can you tell me what the household unit equivalent approach would mean? Whether that would be a fixed charge or how that might apply?
The household thing is I don't think it can apply in this circumstance, and the reason I say that is there's no real reference to it within the district plan. That would be something that some councils could take through as part of a district plan review to consider the household unit. I haven't had a lot of exposure to a household unit, but I am aware that it may be Kapiti or Pairua where they are used. They're set at a particular figure sometime at the time that their district plans were adjusted, and then each year they're incrementally taken up based on some sort of inflationary figure. But really, household units is more of a topic of conversation for the district plan review.
Madam Chair, through you, if I could ask Fergus, look, the other thing that just really disturbs me about this report, bottom of page 247 and top of page 248, for some time officers have been using a rule of thumb, an informal internal working process whereby $750 was taken for additional rural lot, which is effectively equivalent to probably 10k value, And then the recreation team apparently brought the matter to the planning team. What, Fergus, when was it? Okay, it's come to us now because members of the public, our customers, have complained. Why was this internal thing, this informal rule of thumb? What's the lot? I don't believe it could have just happened by staff whim. So at what point did we as a council decide to take this approach? And why hasn't this issue come to us for resolution earlier in the process? It seems to me a failure of the management-government relationship, seriously.
Well, I suppose the short answer is that Hamish is dying to answer, but I'll answer first and then he can tell me where I've gone wrong. The short answer to that is that we were not aware. So this goes back quite some considerable time, is my understanding. And probably to some extent has something to do with the fact that the planning department over quite some period of time has really been understaffed and under pressure. But Hamish, did you want to add something to that?
Thank you, Mr. Powers. I would only add that each council, like Mackenzie or Waimati, where there are somewhat similar provisions, have taken their own kind of approach to this. This isn't necessarily a governance matter. The governance matter was decided when the district plans were promulgated and went through, and so people have set up a system to try and fulfil those matters in the district plan. And I guess where the issues have come is that over time, because the district plan is based on market value and market value changes, the values that we have created through the planning department in the dim distant past are no longer reflective of the market, of true market value, and therefore quite rightly should be adjusted accordingly based on the district plan. It just hasn't happened until now, but I mean, it has maybe come through members of the public or applicants being concerned about changes. But again, the district plan is the district plan. Market value hasn't changed or been removed from the district plan, and therefore it is, in our view, relevant in this discussion.
Sorry, we've got another couple of wings.
Sorry.
So Councillor Percival.
My question was more about how what we heard from the surveyor this morning, how involved have those stakeholders and customers been in this report?
They've been quite. We had a workshop last year in December, looking at what sort of way forward could be derived. We had valuers in that room. In fact, they're probably online now. Out of those discussions, primarily option 1 and 2, I think were the kind of the favoured ones that came out of that. We have lots of discussions on a sort of a ongoing basis with surveys and valuers as we try and determine market value, or we look through cases through the subdivision process. So that discussion is both ongoing and will probably remain so during the course of the district plan review as well.
Councillor Percival.
In your opening decision objective, as a result of consistent source consent processing may reduce applicant source consent costs. And down a bit further in the summary, you also have the same indication of cost diminishing as far as there is source consent. How does that apply? And secondly, I wonder, the existing approach to financial contributions seems to work, but it does have problems with residential township zones. But is it not more a levy than a tax? Like, if a home's worth, if a bit of land's worth 100,000 or worth $1 million, why should it be based on the value of that property against being a levy, which is for the purpose of what financial contributions are, which is to promote, preserve, protect land allocated for recreational use? That's its only purpose. Am I wrong?
I'll just pass to Fergus firstly to.
Yeah, I think that's a very valid question. I think what Mr. Burrell is trying to indicate, though, is that the district plan, that is the point at which this question was addressed, and the mechanism is explicitly expressed in the district plan. I suppose I might be, you know, perhaps icing it a little bit, but I suppose that back in the past, it may be that land values did not move all that much, but certainly over the last few years, land values have moved quite a bit. And so what the payments that have been requested of developers have probably historically been less than they should have done. It's just that staff had not been alert to the fact that valuations had changed so markedly. The method of doing this, of course, can change for the new district plan if you think that that is beneficial.
Capital Council, Pastoral. Questions?
Really got an answer.
In terms of the reduction to consent costs for the applicant, if option 2 is supported, that would remove the cost of a registered valuation. So the cost of engaging a valuer to undertake that work, to provide that information with the resource consent application. So there would be a saving to the applicant.
There's a transactional cost as part of the resource consent. It may mean that the overall financial contribution could be higher, but in terms of going through the process, some, you know, through the workshop and that, some people have indicated that having a valuation is both a cost and slows the process down. That's kind of what I'm trying to.
So if you were to change, you would be working on the consented value of the property, which has been applied from regulatory. Is that how you work with value?
There's different bands outlined there based on our discussions with stakeholders, and that would be the approach under option 2. I believe option 1 requires a little bit more work about getting a average value. You could look presumably to just use what's in the ratings base as well. But again, there are different means. It's trying to come up with a idea, which is probably what they did at the outset to implement this this policy, to actually provide to serve the district plan to implement it at the lowest and most efficient means possible.
Right, we'll move on. I've got a few waiting to speak, so we'll have Councillor Wallstein, then Mel Mine, then Mick Roby, and we'll just see how we're going for time. Councillor Hopkins.
Sorry, that was a question.
Councillor Wallstein.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Just a couple of points on approach number B, or option 2 on the bands. Go look at page 250, but bands set out there. So if I had for example, a number, first question, if I had a property with value of 100K, I pay it 75 or 125 because one goes to 100K and one starts at 100K. So that probably needs to be tidied up a little bit to make sure you know which band you're going to fall in.
Yes, yep, that's a fair point.
Yeah, that's my main point really was though, if I was doing subdivision and on the band situation, if I was below the midpoint, I would be very happy. Sorry, if I was above the midpoint, I'd be very happy. If I was below the midpoint, I'd think, hey, I'm paying on a higher rate than what my section is. And if you're taking the one from 100 to 150, and the market value is 125, if you're a property $10,000 below 125, it would be cheaper for you to get a valuation, show your true value, and just pay on the band.
And I don't think this prevents people. I mean, we can take this approach at council, which sort of ties our hands, but that doesn't tie an applicant's hands from challenging the process. And we fully expect that they may well try and come back with a valuation report. That's just something that we deal with all the time through the application process.
So my following up that, Hamish, thank you, that's my very point. So if there was, take an example of that, if someone fell in the band of 125, between 100 and 150, but the section's only worth 105, if they got a market valuation, said the section's only worth 105,000, would council then charge them 105, or does the band still apply at 125? If this policy, if this recommendation is approved as it stands.
My understanding is, and I'll be corrected, that is the case, that if they do come back with a valuation, which will be more accurate than this, the approach that we're looking there, which is generic by its very nature, then we would go with that lower figure.
Well, does that recommendation need to be amended then to actually provide for that?
I would be supportive of that recommendation being changed to clarify that point.
Well, I'd be really happy to bring an amendment to recommendation number 1.
We don't have a movement on the table at the moment, so I'll take that as a notice to move.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair.
And I'll take Councillor Milne 1.
No, I've sort of lost discussion. I'm okay.
Okay, no worries. Councillor McGroby.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Hamish, questions. We talked earlier about fairness, and so did the this morning about fair. Option 4 and option 5 to me aren't fair. And so if I was just looking at this from a fairness perspective, I wouldn't vote for option 4 or 5. The reason for 5 is because you say there no change to the ad hoc informal approach, or you say best guesstimate. So when I see that in a recommendation or the options being assessed, I wouldn't support that. Capping the maximum amount payable, I don't think that's fair either. So if we looked at option 1 or 2, you are still going to have some degree of cost to be able to work out what those bands or fixed fees are going to be, whether for urban or rural areas. So there is going to be a valuer type person involved in this process somewhere along the way, whether it be for us or whether it be for the applicant. Correct? Okay, so therefore, it might be easier to manage if there was a fixed fee, which is option 1, with more input from an external party to give us more information. So I'm saying in my case, and from my perspective at this point, I am probably going to struggle to make a decision on this today because I think we might need to get a bit more information. And there doesn't seem to be any, as you said before, any immediate urgency to address this right now, which comes to my last point. Why do you think we need to do this one? Apart from the district plan review that's moving.
Well, key questions. I mean, I've spoken to a couple of developers recently who are on the fringes of the urban environment, and they would argue that it's unfair that the person next door in the rural environment for a 4 hectare section pays $750 and they have to pay, you know, thousands of dollars. I guess it's not so much the key message here is this is from my point of view, we're administering provisions that provide council revenue. So the real question is probably not for me whether it's urgent, but whether as a council you view improving the revenue stream to be important, urgent, or critical. I guess we just, and so it's probably not the best question for myself to answer, but what I would say is that some urgency on my part comes from the fact that this has, I guess, for want of a better word, dragged on for a little bit, uncertainty. And my impressions is that people would like us to be more certain sooner. So we had that workshop in December and it's now October, and there's still changing and evolving circumstances. So actually for the whole community, we think we've come up with a better solution, and therefore we feel that there is some degree of urgency to, also maybe not the wrong word, isn't urgency, but there is a need to bring certainty sooner rather than let it carry on as it is. I don't think I've answered all of your questions.
Chair, just one final, if I may. Just been looking at Waitaki, the best place to be under prosperous district. And previously we had an affordable district in our focus. So where does your various options to help people, to develop our area to become economically more viable and district, versus here we are trying to ramp up or set a fee that might have a two-tier structure to it. Where does that fit into our strategic focus in terms of the wider district?
I see that more as something for the district plan review. I see this as more of an operational matter, an administrative matter, and how we're implementing our current provisions. So what we're saying there is we have this in the district plan. We just need a steer from council as to how this should be administered. And don't forget that it's a question of quality of environment and lifestyle and wanting people to come here and having the right recreational facilities versus making the subdivision process as affordable as it needs to be. But don't forget, I guess, when people do develop land, there is a natural kind of financial motive behind that, and that's the area where we're where this levy or fee or financial contribution comes from. So it's quite different in some ways from saying, well, we'll put up rates on everyone.
Okay, thank you.
Right, I'll take Mayor Kircher and then yourself, Councillor Hopkins, before Councillor Wallstein's notice of motion. So, Mayor Kircher, you're still on mute.
Thank you very much. Yeah, it's more really, I think, of position and so on. So, but not knowing what the motion's going to be. The issue is something that's been sitting there for quite some time, which but isn't one that we've been aware of, and so I do think it needs to be addressed. As far as the rural side of things goes, I was certainly under the impression it was a very different way of working out how much was paid there rather than a flat amount, and that certainly hasn't been fair, and we need to address that. But I do also think we need to look at what the percentage is, and because that hasn't moved. But in the meantime, since that time, we've brought in development contributions in a way that we didn't have before. So I'll see what the motion is, but I'll speak to that. But yeah, I don't really have a question at the moment. Thank you.
Great question. Councillor Hopkins.
It was just a couple of very quick questions. Number one, you said, the district plan is a district plan. Just pushing back a little on that, wouldn't it be fair to say that the district plan exists not so much in its as much in its implementation and enactment as in its wording? So, and you went on to say later on that we've tried to find efficient and flexible ways to implement what is in the plan. So I would argue that what you've done is as much part of the plan as the wording in it. And my question would be, is that fair? And the next question, picking up from Ross, is given that you think strategic issues are matters for the district plan review, would you accept that it might be possible in this instance just to have a kind of an interim, a less than perfect interim remedy that easy kiss, cheap and cheerful, not necessarily perfect, but that we can put in place until we actually do the higher concept, strategic thinking around the plan? What would be your view to that as an option?
My view on that is simply that, I mean, land prices have gone up. We should be continuing to maintain a efficient or pragmatic view on life, but land prices have gone up considerably. And so I feel that what we're doing here is reflecting what is in the district plan better, but taking it in a fairly pragmatic way. So reducing charges potentially for valuers face at first up. So for me, I don't get a sense from the stakeholders we have engaged that anything we've set out here is going to upset the apple cart too much. But again, a lot of them are sort of our agents, and we haven't talked to the wider community. The problem with taking, I mean, we are where we are in terms of the district plan review. What I've said is it's not going to be next year or even the year next after that when we'll be able to say we've got a new system. And each system, even the household equivalence units, has its flaws and defects. And there isn't, as far as I know, a perfect option out there. So look, I think we're trying to make the best of the provisions that we've got. That's what we've put before you.
Move back to Councillor Wallstein.
Yeah, thank you, Mel. But before I actually do move to resolution number 1, can I just ask a question on resolution number 2, and which is decides on the percentage payable up to 7.5% to be applied. So my question is, who decides on the 7.5%? Up to 7.5%. That leaves it a very open resolution between 1% and 7.5%.
I think that's our decision today, is it not?
Is it? Well, I don't. Well, it's not in the recommendation. And but what I was going to say is though that this whole matter has been raised by the Recreation and Services team to fund the open spaces costs, because based on the flat amount being charged up until now, the amount of money being received is inadequate for the demand. The amount of money that's to be spent. So I think it definitely needs to change. But again, because of the rising land prices, as you mentioned, Hamish, if the same percentages apply to the rising land prices, it's going to probably result in quite a large extra amount of revenue received by council. And is an extra large amount that's received more than what is required? So given the rise in land values, my question is, would 5% be enough rather than 7.5%?
No, that's a really good question. Again, we have consulted the Parks Department. But again, I'm not really the expert in that particular question.
If you move to page 252, there's a bit of a small breakdown, because I think it was the intention that councillors came up with a percentage figure today for 0.2. And that sort of gives a bit of a breakdown of what that means.
Which one?
Under the table there on 252. So you've got some options of 7.5%, 5%, and different. So it's only a very basic kind of two figures there. It's not gone into much detail.
Yes. Yeah, sure. Yes. Yeah.
To give us a bit of an idea.
But that illustrates the point that I was making. The rate between 2.55 and 7.5, there are very big differences. So, and I just wonder whether our recommendation, going back to the page there, is, as it's written, just saying up to 7.5%, really what we're trying to achieve today.
Well, again, there are different options there in capping the maximum amount. I mean, it may be that you want to cap it at amount below the 7.5%.
Yeah.
Would I be right in saying you're asking for us for a percentage amount and there for us to confirm?
Yeah.
So it's not saying it's 7.5, it's saying that we need to make a decision on a figure up to 7.5.
Obviously going back to page 152, 2.2, on that chart again, looking at the rural residential 7.5
Yeah, it's a bit confusing.
Which page? Can we just have clarification around the page number?
So 252, but
table on 252.
Isn't this the total amount that we would be getting? I took those numbers, 500,000, 300,000, and then 2.5. And I don't know why it's not available other than the fact that you didn't want to tell us what it was going to be, but that's not there. As I understand it, that's what you are arguing we would collect, yes?
Yes. So that information's being collated from completed subdivisions, so 2 to 4's been issued.
Well, that point your bottom line rural, you've got 75%. Current
yes. Yep.
39,000, then 2.5% of market value, 96,000.
So the footnote there, that 2.5% is based on the overall land value rather than the 1,000 square metres as it's currently drafted in the district plan. So that would require some further refinement, but it gives you an idea of the likely revenue.
Take a question from Councillor Milmine, just while we're working through.
Well, this is a tricky one because it's kind of a statement because we're kind of stuck in a, it's not really a question, it's just, we just can't lose sight while we're looking at this today. And that is because there has been some huge anomalies in the past and there is no such thing as a perfect system, as Hamish is saying. But what we've been doing hasn't been perfect. There has been some instances where we are missing out and we shouldn't be. And the developers are getting away wonderfully, whereas someone doing something really simple in town is getting burnt. So all that we've got in front of us today is trying to find a way forward to do this in a much fairer way, and that's what we set our officers on a task to do, and that's exactly what they've put in front of us. There is no perfect system. But what we were doing was not fair. And it does concern me what Cameron Leakey's response to this paper this morning, that we were trying to fill up a slush fund and that we were maybe doing this in a greedy way. I haven't taken this report at all written out that way, and maybe he didn't understand the context when he was reading it. But basically, we're trying to find a fairer way for everyone, and I, for that fact, do support the recommendation. Certainly, it's recommendation 1. That option 2 is the way forward here.
Councillor Wilson, are you ready to move?
Yeah, well, I'm ready to move here. So I'd like to move an amendment to both recommendation 1 and 2. So my amendment to recommendation number 1 is approves option 2, the tiered / approach B, or based on a rigid valuation to calculate the quantum of the same, rest of it same.
So just adding the
Just the option. So you're providing an option for the tiered approach B, or based on rigid valuation
Calculate.
Yeah, to calculate the rest of it as per the original resolution.
Okay.
And then for option, the recommendation 2, besides on the percentage up to 7.5%, as written there, comma, to be decided by council based on the receipt of further information. I'm thinking there that we need to actually decide whether it is, this up to 7.5% to me is too loose, for want of a better word. We need to decide whether it is 2.5%, 5%, or 7.5%. But I don't think this report gives us the information to make that decision. I'm just saying that we should decide on that as for option 2, but to be decided, the rate to be decided based on receipt of further information.
Are you better to simplify in that respect rather than decides on the percentage payable? Put that requests more information to come to council on the percentage.
The percentage rate. Yeah, yes, certainly. Yes, and that's
just for simplicity.
Simpler, yeah, same result, simpler wording. So
How does that affect the first recommendation, Mr. Rowe?
So the first recommendation is looking at 7.5%, where you have you have an average across urban areas and an average across rural areas. Option 2 is essentially option 1, but there's bands, so you have within a particular urban area different sort of slots where you can set your market value. And look, certainly we can take further information back to look at what those percentages could be, but there has been, I guess, quite a lot of discussion to date on that already, and at the moment, if somebody comes in tomorrow, then they will be paying 7.5% with urban areas and 750 with rural zones.
Point of order, Madam Chair. We've got a motion on the table, 2 motions on the table. Flagging anxiety about 1, but I'm more than happy to second number 2, which has been moved by Councillor Wallstein. That says that we will decide on the percentage payable, or that we seek further advice on the percentage payable for residential and rural zones, etc., etc.
Oh, can we see if we've got first of all a mover that will do both? At the stage might be easier. A seconder, sorry, we've got a mover for number 1 as it stands, but adding the registered valuation as an option, and number 2 asking for more information to be provided. Do we have a seconder on both of those? Councillor Milne, thank you. And yeah, I don't think it was an issue there. We were trying to clarify what the
I'd like you to put
that was.
two.
Problem. Right, so discussion on, we'll go for 1 and 2 at the moment, and we've got Mayor Kircher as well as hand up.
From what I understand, the motion. Yep, I'm off. From what I understand, the motion to be, it means council and / the ratepayer is the loser in both counts. We're going to average something, but actually, if you end up paying above the average, you can get a registered valuation, which puts you into the lower bracket. So you know, I think it does need to be one or the other. Obviously, people should be able to challenge that, and maybe that's when they get a valuation. But being able to do it via either method means that if the value comes in, and you know you're on the wrong side of the line, it's worth getting a valuation done, because that'll put you to pay less than you would have otherwise. So yeah, it's a bit both ways, which just I don't think works, and I would not support that. As far as the percentage discussion, the problem there is if we are putting a percentage on a rural residential, or particularly on a rural property that's the whole lot of the land, you can get very different things. You might have a subdivision where someone's got 20 hectares, and to value that and pay a percentage on that would be totally unfair compared to someone who's got the same house on a bit of land that's perhaps 4 hectares. And so that it raises inequities there. We do need more clarity on that, so I support that we get more information, and that will help us make that decision. In the meantime, it would sit where it is. I believe the current rule is that we can charge up to 7.5%, which I think staff usually just take that as 7.5. But equally, the rural has been well undervalued, paying only $750 compared to what everyone else has to pay. So we need to fix the problem. We can't just let this go. But I don't think that we've got the right solution in front of us at the moment.
Councillor Hopkins.
Yeah, I'm speaking to this. I'm going to vote against number 1 for slightly different reasons to the Mayor, but I think he's right that we need more information. I will certainly vote for number 2. But I just want to make the point, people have talked about the matter of equity. A charge is not a rate. A charge is a provision of service. And I mean, we don't discriminate on the basis of income when people, I mean, this is a very small example, but we don't discriminate on the basis of income for library books or access to the aquatic centre or whatever. And my view is, in this instance, if you think about it, rates use charges are always regressive. They will always have a greater impact on people who have less income, or in this instance, less value of their land. But rates are redistributive, so they actually take a progressive view of income and say you've got more than somebody else, so we can take more from you to allocate to them. In this instance, the financial contribution is for a provision of service. It's open space recreation and parks. And the one thing that we haven't heard from Fergus, from Hamish, from anyone, is what we are spending every year. Because in theory, the FCs, like the DCs, should be either all of or a part of the annual spend, OPEX and CAPEX, or one or t'other, or both. And if we want a percentage for the charge, we should have in front of us it clear and just incontrovertible argument about the costs. What do the recreation people think they're missing out on? What projects have they had to postpone? Where are the open spaces not being serviced because the financial contributions are not as they should be, whatever? Gary's right, the Mayor is right, 750 for rural is wrong, but in the meantime, until we get some strategic thinking around this in the district plan, I would personally prefer an interim solution that increases the rural and maybe comes at a market rate for market value formula for residential and urban, but at a much lower percentage than 7.5, maybe 2.5 or 5. Bearing in mind that if you're right about market values going up, you'll be making as much, if not more, with a lower percentage from the higher quantum. So as of this moment, I'm not willing to support 1, but I will vote for 2.
Okay, Councillor Milman.
I'd just like to address the fact that there actually has been a lot of thought and effort go into this. I know it's a very complex area and hard for people to get their head around, but just to sort what Gary's concerns are, in the rural and residential zones, it says on page 251, the market value of only 1,000 metres square site was going to be considered to put it comparably to a plot in town. So that all was taken into account when they were assessing how to look at each of these options. And basically, and just want to give people an idea of how the system currently works and why this has come about. Someone could plan a huge subdivision, and for example, one of the, we've got many going on at the moment. You get a valuation done on a plot of land, it could be 2 or 3 years ago, and that valuation is accurate for every single section sold after that point. Of course, at the time that the valuation is done 2 or 3 years ago, that plot of land might be worth, just arbitrary figure, $100,000, and that's what they pay financial contributions on. And by the time they come around to selling the section, some of them could be 2 years later, that plot of land could be worth $150,000. Now, the only person that's making money here is the developer, and the person that's purchased that plot of land has still they have spent $150,000. It's irrelevant to them what the financial contributions were. what we're trying to sort out here is a huge disparity between what a developer pays versus what is paid by someone subdividing their plot of land in town to build their own house on the rear of their own section. So they're trying to come up with some really clever ways here, and none of us could sit here and try and nut this out. We've had people, specialists working on this, trying to give us a way forward, and we just need to give them a chance. There is no perfect solution, but certainly I can see that there is some great ideas, adding in Colin's idea of wanting a registered valuation to let people out of it. It's not fair someone at the band of 150,000 may get charged at 175,000. Let's get them a chance to prove that their plot of land isn't worth 175,000, but by paying a registered valuation, that's no loss to us. It doesn't matter. The reality is what we're trying to do is make a fairer system all round, and they have achieved that by their option that they're recommending. Thank you.
Homeowner pays.
The homeowner.
Councillor Hopkins, you've had your opportunity to
Sorry,
speak.
interjection, Madam Chair.
We don't need
I was being a bit cheeky.
Any other comments from councillors on that? And I'll just, before you do your right of reply, I support what we've got in front of us for recommendations, because I do agree with Councillor Milmine. It's not that we're losing at every turn, it's just giving people the tools and the opportunity to question where we've been sitting them and what they're paying. And that makes it fairer, but also I think it means that it keeps things a lot more within our policy. So we're not always looking at our policy later on and changing it through a challenge kind of position, which is what we do too often, which then goes against our officers' recommendations and against our own policies if we're making changes. This actually gives our officers the ability at the start of the process to say, here's another avenue you can have if you're not happy with the direction things are going in, and to still stay within the policy, and it's supporting our policy and our officers through that. So it's just giving people opportunities. And reality is, it's not about who wins or loses, it's the fairest way, and it's a person feeling at the end of the process like they have actually got the fairest option in front of them. So I think that's good, and I also believe that recommendation too. I don't think we're comfortable with the level of information we've got to make enough of a good decision on that one. So this is a good option in the interim. So, Councillor Walston.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, just referring to recommendation number 1 again, and referring to Gary's statement that it wasn't fair. I agree, it does give someone who's below the middle of the band the option to then have a valuation and pay at the true market price, not the middle of the band, whereas somebody above the middle is just going to accept the band. And I think in terms of trying to keep it simple for our staff, it's either that, to my mind, or you require a valuation for every case. So I think it's a good midpoint where someone who's going to be really penalised is able to actually remedy that problem. Someone who's going to make a gain, well, I think council is still making a pretty good, receiving a decent amount of financial contribution, maybe less than what the property is worth, but still making a very substantial receipt of money from that payment. And secondly, in terms of the percentage payable, leaving that further information, that was just the point that Councillor Hopkins made, that I was making as well, is that we don't have the information. We need to know what money is being spent by the Recreation Services Department on open space and recreation, and how much they are short by, and how much they think that the rate the amount should be increased by. And that's where we come back to being 4%, 5%, 6%, 7.5% maybe. So, I think that the two recommendations that I have proposed and seconded by Councillor Milmine, I think are fair and hopefully will receive support.
Mr. Hope, do you have anything you can?
Yeah, sorry. The use of the RMA has been discussed at each long-term plan, and a very long schedule of potential works has been created by the recreation team. And then that has been, basically that list has been cut off based on the estimate of the amount of funds that are going to be generated. it's not, it works really completely the opposite direction from development contributions, where you go through, come up with a comprehensive list and then set a fee to recover that amount. It's basically council's approach and the approach act is to you use the fund as far as possible, yet there are still matters that are not funded through it. So it basically was exhausted after 3 years in the last long-term plan. So there is far more demand than funds being generated in terms of the contributions from 7.5%. And the cost of providing those has also increased, much like the land value. So that's essentially how the fund comes the other way. So I'm really not sure what additional information could be provided other than perhaps the long list that was presented at the last long-term plan and the cut-off point to it. There's certainly more demand than funds available.
And I think that probably would have been, that's probably the helpful information that comes into this, but it's also probably on asking us to name a figure, and there's probably not enough breakdown to really get an understanding of what that's going to mean. I think is where that's coming from. But I'll put the motion. Okay, we're going to repeat what the motion is. So we're going to take them one at a time. And the first one.
That council approves option 2, bracket, the tiered band / approach B, close bracket, or the registered valuation to calculate the quantum of financial contributions related to and applied as part of the subdivision resort consent process.
Probably should be a registered valuation rather than the.
Right, so we're clear on the first one here. Right, well, I'll put that. All in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
And against?
No.
No.
Could I have my vote against recorded, please?
Yes, you can. We'll do a show of hands on that one because I think it's relatively close. So those 4, can you please raise your hands? 2, 3, 4, 5, and those against. So that's, yep, that's passed. Right, so we'll move on to number 2, and I'll just reconfirm what we're talking about.
Recommendation 2 was amended, and it was the requests that further information comes to council on the percentage rate.
Well, I think the rest of the wording in that number 2 should be there, residential and rural zones personally. But I thought that was what Colin moved.
Well, I did, but that obviously makes it make it simpler, but
Yeah, this was the chair's amendment.
yeah.
That further information comes to council on the percentage rate, and you're saying payable, but it wasn't recorded at the time. Do you?
Well, it's not a seconder, and but I think possibly just a little bit more to add to it. Yeah, I think once again, for residential and rural zones to be applied, making the subdivision, so it's very clear what we're requesting information on.
A seconder comfortable with that?
Right.
Councillor McGrovey?
We decided on the percentage pay up to 7.5%, up to. What extra information will that give us? Are we looking for a fixed percent? We'll still have the ability to go up to 7.5%. This does give us the ability to be able to go up to, whether it's 5, 6, 4, 1, or whatever.
I guess the we're at 7.5, we're up to 7.5 currently. It's probably providing more direction to staff as to what we're comfortable with level wise. So I think in the interim we are looking at 7.5% until anything's decided otherwise. Am I correct in saying that?
Councillor Milne.
But can I just point out that under assessment of option 2, B, it does say that they consider the appropriate percentage to be 5% in urban areas and 2.5% in rural zones, taking into account future impact from COVID-19. And that the officers believe that to be an appropriate figure for our guidance.
My reason for making that, for asking more information, was really this up to 7.5% leaves it everything in the hands of the officers. And it could be 5% here, it could be 6% there, it could be 7.5% here. I think we need more certainty as to the rate rather than just being up to 7.5%. I'd be hoping for a recommendation of some information to return to be provided to us, giving us the rates may be different for urban, rural, etc., etc. Because there are different rates shown in one of the charts, but rates which may apply to each category that seem to be thought to be fair. Fair to council and fair to the developer.
I'll let you have another go, Councillor Milne.
I just feel like that this report probably wasn't written in a way that is helping us flow through this conversation in the best possible way. But I feel like every single thing that we want to know is in front of us and what they're recommending. And it's just that we aren't finding it when we need to, and that our recommendations aren't written in a way that is solid enough with what we're trying to decide here. But they are recommending under option 2, 5% in a residential zone, 2.5% in a rural zone, and it's appropriate taking into account the situation that we're currently living in.
I'll take your point there, Councillor Milne. Right, based on that, I'll put the motion. Is everyone clear on what they're voting on? Right.
Sorry, please repeat it if you don't mind. It's right.
Yes.
Recommendation 2, that council requests that further information comes to council on the percentage rate payable for residential and rural zones to be applied in calculating the financial contribution on subdivision.
Okay, so I'll put that. All in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
And against?
Okay.
No. Right, that's passed.
Please record my thank you.
And I'll record mine too, please. Mayor Kircher.
Could I have could I make a third motion, please? That clarification is brought to council on the setting of values regarding the bands.
I don't know. Well, I'll second that pro forma. I don't know what you mean. Well, I want to tease it out of it.
So, thanks, Councillor Hopkins. Speaking to that, we don't have a clear idea of what there's different references. There's talk about average values in areas. I don't know if that's geographic areas or sorry, I'll just find the actual wording. Based on average values across the respective areas. So if we're talking geographical, which there is a reference to later on, it also has in the calculations residential, urban Oamaru, including Western, Kakanui and Meraki, and then it's got 4 bands. So that's not an average across those areas. So I'm not sure how someone determines what the value is of a particular bit of land without getting a registered valuation, which according to this could fall anything but anywhere between $50,000 and $200,000. And then in other areas, Odamatata only is allowed to fall within 150 to 200, and Marama 150 to 200, Kurau 100 to 150. So the examples were given, and the list goes on. The examples were given are quite limited, and there isn't a clear indication. We've just trying to sort out a problem of what's happened in rural areas, which is something we weren't aware of. And I think we're actually causing another problem. What I'd like is clarification from staff. How are they going to come to the values that actually they're going to apply to the situation, so that we have clarity, that the developers have clarity, and the ratepayers have clarity?
So Mayor Kircher, are you comfortable with me to see if Mr. Burrell can provide some of that right now, or he's got his hand up wanting to respond to you?
I think clarity means, and transparency means it needs to be in writing. We need to have agreed to it.
Yeah. Look, I'm happy to turn my pro forma into, I know that the Mayor's, well, I've seconded that motion. I understand this now, and I support it. And I support the fact that it comes to us again at another meeting.
Okay, our officer's clear on what the Mayor's asking for there.
Further information, what I would say is that there is an approach on page, the page relating to under the discussion, where it does have different geographic kind of areas where we've set some of those bands, and that's probably about as explicit as we can be at this stage. The option one is much cruder. It just looks to lump in rural and residential generally across the district. That was the simplicity of it. I don't know whether it's helpful to this discussion also, because many questions have been raised around what money has been spent where, and if it was going to lead to a better outcome, I would be keen for Mr. Van der Spek to answer that very specific question.
It's probably not what we've got in front of us at the moment. I think that I can put this, and if we need some clarification as to what information comes back and how we want it provided, you can perhaps work with the Mayor or otherwise to try and get that clarification. So are we, just repeat what the motion is on front of us?
That clarification is brought to council on the setting of values regarding the bands.
All right, and it's seconded by Councillor Hopkins. So any other discussion on that? Well, I'll put it. All in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
And against, that's carried. Right, thank you very much. Thank you.
Madam Chair, sorry to interrupt. I'm parked on Prohibition Road. I'm going to carry on the journey, so I'm going to officially leave the meeting. So thanks very much.
Just, if you can wait for just a moment. We were,
Don't leave us.
Excuse me, Councillor Hopkins.
Sorry.
We were going to go back to your report. We've received your report, but we were looking at the extra recommendation we're going to put through your report around the rating, and just want to know if you want to be present for that. We've held that for you.
This is around rates.
Yep.
And yeah, I mean, yeah, it's, I think basically it's been given to be used how we want it to be used, and we can make that a formal resolution, but normally a mayoral relief fund doesn't require a resolution of council as to how it's utilised. So I mean, it depends on what councillors want to do, but if you want to do it by resolution, then we can do that.
I guess it wasn't probably so much on the use of the mayoral relief fund as much as the expectation around rates payable for the OHA residents, so whether or not we supported a remission at this stage. So there was a recommendation that was sent through to you from Mr. Hope.
Yeah, and I'd responded to that, which said basically I think that would be good use of the relief fund that's been given from central government. They've given that without any ties, and what it means is that for those people who cannot use their homes because they've been destroyed or partly destroyed, they won't have to pay the next installment. But if it's a straight remission, as Mr. Hope pointed out in his email. That means that the cost of services which still are there then fall to the other ratepayers. Basically, it puts those various accounts into deficit compared to the expected finances coming in. So the use of the fund makes sure that the accounts are all paid and no one else is disadvantaged at the same time.
Cool. So you're comfortable we can do that without a recommendation?
I believe so, yeah.
Perfect. Well, we'll leave you there then.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Cheers, Gary.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. And that will break for lunch.
Councillor Garvin would be thrilled.
On time.